That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes. Probably the biggest faller outside of Cam Akers for this month in Dynasty has been Michael Thomas. I mean, it's going to be very hard to sit here and tell you exactly what Michael Thomas is worth in Dynasty when there's so much uncertainty around this injury. But what I wanted to do to try to help everyone out is I wanted to try to get a real gauge on what the Dynasty community is thinking of the Michael Thomas value. So what I did is I went to Twitter, I sent out 5 hypothetical trades, and I said, hey, where do you want Michael Thomas? Do you want him over Deebo Samuel? Do you want him over Elijah Moore? Do you want him or a future first-round pick? And of course, we're going to get to all those trades. But before we get to anything, guys, please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And we are going to be announcing our next Patreon Flock Dynasty League on August 2nd over there on Patreon. Now, I think it's either going to be a very early or a very late announcement during the day because I want to make sure that we're giving the people overseas a shot to get into these Dynasty Leagues. So please make sure you're all on the lookout for that. And also, of course, this is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Now, the best thing that you could ever do to support this channel, because I know a lot of people, they can't afford, or maybe they just don't want to support the show on Patreon, which is completely fine. I understand that. But we have an offer that is literally too good to pass up on, and I promise you it helps out the channel so much. Literally go to Underdog Fantasy, prepare for your season this upcoming year, spend $10 on a deposit, get $25 for free, and at the same time, get my 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. And I'll send you our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide with historical research for this 2021 Dynasty Rookie class at the same time. But that's it. Let's dive into this video, and let's talk about Michael Thomas. So Michael Thomas was a player that I actually thought was an intriguing buy low candidate. I don't want to say a month ago, but a good while ago, just because you were looking at Thomas going, okay, this is a player that we have seen be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy before. We have seen him be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. So I thought if we were able to go out there and we were able to buy him at a discount, it's something that we wanted to at least try to do. Because with Michael Thomas here, yes, of course, there's always the concern that this is a player that's a little bit older. He's 28 years old. So when you're buying him, of course, you're not buying him with the chance to flip for a higher price later on. Now, I think that now with the injury, you actually may be able to do that. We'll get to that later in the video. But if we were talking about buying him a month ago, that was more so a thought process in saying that this is a player that his production is going to outweigh the price that you have to pay in Dynasty. And we went through and thought that that was a good reason because you look at his 2018 and 2019 seasons. And we discussed this a lot in the 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide, where you pull it up. And I mean, in 2018, this is a player that averages 20 points a game. In 2019, he was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy with 23 points a game. And I am all about trying to find those players that are seeing a dip down in value because of an injured season, because you clearly see based on his 2019 and 2018 years that this is a wide receiver that his baseline expectation, if he's healthy, he's a top 10 option. Whereas in 2020, he suffers that ankle injury at the very beginning of the season. He ends up being the wide receiver 41 in points per game. And you just see that sharp drop off. And we said this in the draft guide before he had that surgery in June. We said this is a wide receiver that clearly was never healthy in 2020. Now, there were no reasons to expect that that injury was still continuing to bother him. But of course, now we know better. Now we know we should have possibly looked into that slightly more. And in this case now with Thomas, you're looking at him as an asset that is possibly just a pure win now asset that's not going to be available for you in 2021 to score points in your lineup. So you're kind of stuck in a spot where you don't necessarily know if you're buying Michael Thomas on a contending team. You don't know if you're buying him on a rebuilding team. So he's stuck in no man's land in terms of his dynasty price. And if we actually go and we pull him up right now with these trades that we have actually sent out as just kind of what ifs, like what side would you possibly rather have? The first one I want to look at is going to be Michael Thomas or a 2022 first round pick in Superflex formats. Now, I honestly thought that this was going to be really close. I thought that this was going to be 50-50. And all of a sudden, I mean, you actually had the 2020 first round pick crushing Michael Thomas in this poll. I mean, you actually see that 70% of people would prefer the 2022 first compared to 30% for Michael Thomas. And I know that doesn't necessarily look like a landslide, but what you really need to understand is on Twitter, these kind of polls, I mean, very rarely is it close to 50-50. If you ever see a landslide, it's more so going to be 70-30. You never see 50-50. You never see 90-10. I mean, you're always stuck in between the 40 to 70 range in terms of the percentages that you're finding. So a 70-30 is a landslide on Twitter. I mean, we can say that the majority of people in Dynasty Fantasy Football would prefer having a random future first compared to Michael Thomas. Now, I think that if you look at this trade and you are a contending team and you're confident that you're a contending team, I would actually prefer Michael Thomas. That's the side that I actually went out there and I voted on. And I understand that you're taking on some risk here. But at the same time, with that 2022 first round pick, who is to say that the prospect that you get is anything close to Michael Thomas in terms of the production that he has in 2022, 2023, 2024? And at the same time, if you're a contending team and you know that even without Michael Thomas, you're going to be a playoff team, you're going to be in the playoff race, most likely going to take down a ship this upcoming season, might as well go out there and get Michael Thomas, and that you're finding him to be a wide receiver that may not be ready to start the year, but by the time you get to the playoffs, he's actually going to be someone that you can go through and you can plug him in to your starting lineup. And we know that for those contending teams, what you need is you need elite production in the fantasy football playoffs. Now, that's all the way, 5 months into the season. So if you're talking about just waiting 5 months from where we are at right now, I think Michael Thomas should be healthy by then. He should be playing in games, and maybe it even takes him 2 to 3 more weeks than we're currently projecting for him to go and get healthy. I mean, still, this is a player that you should be able to start during your playoff stretch. So if you're a contending roster, I actually really like the idea of going out there and trading your 2022 first, if you have not already, for Michael Thomas. Now, please let me know what y'all think in the comment section, because, this is a very new development. There is so much uncertainty with this Michael Thomas injury that your opinion is just as, if not way more valuable than mine here. So please make sure you go to the comment section and let me know what you think with really all of these trades. So now our next trade is going to be a split 50-50. This is literally like the closest Twitter poll that I have seen in I don't know how long. Here we asked, would you rather have Michael Thomas or Trey Sermon in Dynasty? And this is very surprising, because this poll is essentially saying that Trey Sermon is significantly more valuable than a future first round pick, because you have this poll split 50-50. Trey Sermon slightly in the lead over Michael Thomas compared to the 70-30 poll that you had with the 2022 first. But beyond that, if we're looking at these two players, I think that this trade in particular is going to come down to what your starting lineup requirements are. Now, of course, I spend the majority of my day actually going through and talking with people about their dynasty teams over there on Patreon. And if they're asking me a trade question, if they're asking me about a draft pick that they're about to make, my first question every single time is, what are your league starting requirements? Because in a league where you need to start 3 wide receivers, you also have 2 to 3 flex spots, so you can essentially plan on playing 5 to 6 wide receivers every week. There, I definitely prefer having Michael Thomas. Whereas if you're playing in a league where possibly you have to start 2 running backs, you only get 1 additional flex spot, and at the most you can only start 3 wide receivers, all of a sudden in a format like that, running back is a lot more valuable, where Trey Sermon does become a little bit more intriguing. Now, what I have a problem with in trying to go through and understand this trade is if we try to just go through and look at the career arc that Trey Sermon may have, at least for his dynasty value in 2021, I am not expecting him to be a running back that earns a significant role on the 49ers right away. I'm assuming that he's going to start the year more so a committee with Raheem Mostert. Mostert most likely being the lead running back in that committee to start the season. I think by the time we get to the end, you're actually going to have Trey Sermon as the lead running back there. So if you're actually going to have to wait about 6 weeks until Trey Sermon is the lead running back in San Francisco, are you sure you wouldn't just rather have a wide receiver that should be healthy by that point? Someone that is going to be, just say, coming off 2 back-to-back top 10 wide receiver seasons if you take out his injured year. Now, maybe this is more so people worried about Michael Thomas never getting back to that point where he can never really rely on that ankle again. But this is another trade where I think unless you're playing in a drastic format, unless you're playing in a points per carry league or a league where you can only start 3 wide receivers at the maximum, I think we actually want Trey Sermon here. So now let's kind of throw out league context in it, because I know that's where it gets a little bit iffy in terms of me trying to advise y'all where you should be going with trades. Let's go to this next one that is just wide receiver versus wide receiver. And this one is Michael Thomas versus Elijah Moore. Now, this trade, in my opinion, is actually the most difficult trade that we have seen so far. Because with Elijah Moore, this is a wide receiver that I loved coming out of Ole Miss. I mean, I thought that we were going to be so much higher than everybody else. When we were about 2 months away from the NFL draft, when you were seeing Elijah Moore go in the 3rd round of Dynasty rookie drafts, and we were taking him in literally every single mock that we had, I couldn't wait to continue to just draft Elijah Moore. I thought we were going to have to push him up to the 2nd round. I thought we were going to have to take him a little bit higher than where he was going. And I thought we were going to end up with them in almost every single Dynasty league, every single redraft league, every single best ball league. But of course, once you get closer to the NFL draft, more people start talking about him, and all of a sudden he skyrockets up draft boards. And now I think that while we still love Elijah Moore, not necessarily screaming from the rooftops as we were previously, just because his price is so much higher. Now, I think actually with Elijah Moore, I do prefer him over Trey Sermon. I do prefer him over the 2022 first-round pick. So now I'm at a point going, do we really want to take Michael Thomas, a 28-year-old wide receiver that's most likely not going to help you significantly this upcoming season, versus a wide receiver that is a fantastic prospect? I mean, we need to remember that Elijah Moore averaged 150 receiving yards in the SEC at 20 years old. This is someone that also went out there and had over 800 receiving yards his true sophomore year on a team that the next best receiver didn't even crack 200. So Elijah Moore, a fantastic prospect. We can kind of take a step back and look at how that Jet situation is going to be in 2022 and go, okay, they're not going to have Jamison Crowder. That's going to open up a significant amount of targets for Elijah Moore, who should be looking to take a step up into his age 22 season. So here, I think we actually prefer Elijah Moore over Michael Thomas. Now, of course, if you are a contending team, if you're a team that you know you're locked into the playoffs and you're really just looking for elite level production, then possibly you decide to go with Michael Thomas over Elijah Moore. But I think we are going to be going with more times than not. So now let's get our next trade up here. And this is going to be very similar. I mean, we're going to go back to the running back position, back to a guy that is going next to Trey Sermon in a lot of drafts. Let's go over to Michael Carter. And this was one of the most surprising polls that I saw, because you pull this up, and yes, Michael Thomas won this poll. He won 66-34. But I mean, at the end of the day, I just want us to kind of put into context how we are viewing these players. While yes, Michael Thomas is on a sharp decline from his peak a year ago, last offseason, he was a 1st round startup pick. That's not that long ago. And now you're viewing him compared to a running back that was drafted on day 3 of the NFL draft. I mean, Michael Carter was drafted on day 3 of the NFL draft, where running backs have like an 8% hit rate to ever have 2 top 24 running back seasons, period. Now, I know Michael Carter's slightly better than an average day 3 running back. I understand he's in a great situation at the same time. But at the end of the day, I want to use this trade just as a reminder that these dynasty assets that you are drafting that are a little bit older, because keep in mind, I think that those pieces like a DeAndre Swift, like a Josh Allen, a Kyler Murray, those young pieces at the top of startup drafts, they're very insulated, where if they see an ankle injury and they're out for a year and then it lingers into the next season, they're still going to hold a decent amount of dynasty value. Whereas when you're betting on those veterans, when you're betting on a Michael Thomas, one injury derailing one season and then partly the 2nd year, I mean, that is going to cause their dynasty value to completely tank, because all you're really looking for is production. You're not looking for a stable dynasty asset. So I want to use this as a warning to say, hey, be careful drafting those other veteran players at the very top of drafts. Be careful drafting a Dalvin Cook over a Saquon Barkley, a Dalvin Cook over a Jonathan Taylor. I think that's honestly kind of crazy at this point to do in dynasty. And at the same time, understand, guys, Michael Thomas was a 1st round startup pick last year. What are you doing because of an ankle injury, drafting a running back that went on day 4 of the NFL draft over Michael Thomas? I mean, he was the wide receiver 1 in 2019. It's not that difficult. Okay, so now our last trade of the video is going to be another one that was a landslide, but we actually had some comments on this tweet saying that they were considering Deebo Samuel. And this one is, would you rather have Michael Thomas or Deebo Samuel straight up? Here, Michael Thomas wins about 71% of the time. And yeah, I think that this is how it should be. I'm not expecting Deebo Samuel to be someone that continuously rises in dynasty value, as he's playing on an offense that has George Kittle tied to it, that has Brandon Ayuk tied to it, that is a quarterback that's going to be looking deep downfield compared to dumping the ball off closer to the line of scrimmage. So Deebo Samuel, you're drafting him for his production for the next 5 to 6 years. Don't necessarily think you're drafting him for a sharp increase in dynasty value like you are drafting Elijah Moore for. So if you're drafting someone for their production, I would much prefer having 1 to 2 seasons of elite Michael Thomas production compared to 5 years of having Deebo Samuel as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 in dynasty. So yeah, I think Twitter got this one right. I think Michael Thomas was the clear answer here. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. Please, guys, make sure you go over there on Patreon. Be on the lookout for what we are going to be announcing late August 2nd, I believe. Yeah, we're going to do it August 2nd. And outside of that, make sure you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. It helps out this channel tremendously. And have a great day, my dudes. We've gotten a ton of new members joining the flock. Thank you, Grind for Gold, Devin, Bungified, Brian, Brody, Victor, Chris, Grant, Trevor, and David. Thank you, my dudes.